The ballroom glittered with gold chandeliers and murmurs of prestige. Every elite in New York was there to celebrate the Langston family's empire anniversary. Among the crowd walked a young man in a modest tuxedo, Ethan Langston, the family's long-lost son. He had returned after years overseas, filled with hope that his parents might finally embrace him again. But as he stepped through the grand doors, the warm welcome he imagined never came. Instead, the crowd fell silent. From the top of the staircase stood Daniel, the angelic adopted son who had been the family's pride. His lips curled into a perfect smile, masking the devil behind it. "You've got a lot of nerve showing your face here, Ethan," Daniel said smoothly. "After what you did to me." Confused murmurs filled the hall. Ethan's heart pounded. What was he talking about? Daniel turned to the crowd, feigning pain. "He tried to drown me when we were kids. I still have nightmares about it." Gasps erupted. His mother covered her mouth in horror. His father's eyes burned with disgust. And in that moment, Ethan realized his nightmare had begun again. Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears as whispers spread through the ballroom like wildfire. The Langston heir, the long-lost son, was now being painted as a villain before New York's most influential. He tried to speak. "That's not true, Daniel, you." But Daniel's trembling act was flawless. He clutched his chest and stepped back dramatically. "You're still denying it. You almost killed me, Ethan. You told me you wished I'd never been part of the family." The crowd gasped again. Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled furiously. Their mother, Margaret Langston, stepped forward, her eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, how could you?" "Mom, please," he began, but she flinched away. His father, Richard Langston, gripped his cane so tightly that the wood creaked. "You have disgraced this family enough," Richard said coldly. "You were given everything, yet you repay us with violence and shame." Then Daniel delivered the killing blow. And that wasn't the worst of it. He even peeked at Emily while she was changing. The room froze. Ethan's world shattered. Emily, his younger sister, looked at him with horror and disgust. "Ethan, how could you?" she whispered. Every eye turned against him. Every word he tried to speak was drowned beneath a tide of judgment and lies. And just like that, the reunion he dreamed of became his public execution. As security dragged him out, Daniel's smirk was the last thing Ethan saw. In his previous life, that smirk haunted him to his death. But this time, Ethan clenched his fists, feeling the chill of destiny coil around him. "Not again. This time I'll burn that smile off your face." The hallway outside the ballroom felt colder than the winter night. Camera flashes followed Ethan like a swarm of accusing eyes. Reporters shouted questions he couldn't hear. His pleas were reduced to nothing more than static in the ears of the people who had once been his family. It was supposed to be a simple thing, an apology, a chance to explain. Daniel had turned that chance into a stage. A waiter accidentally brushed Ethan as he passed, sending a crimson glass of vintage port arcing through the air. Time slowed, the liquid blossomed across Ethan's chest and down his pristine tux. Gasps. A dollop of red bloomed on Margaret's white sleeve. A photographer's shudder sounded like a gunshot. "Clumsy," someone whispered. "Disrespectful," another hissed. Daniel stepped forward with the wounded air of a martyr, offering his arm to Emily as though protecting her from a monster. The cameras feasted. The tabloids would run a dozen different headlines by morning. He ruined the Lady Langston's dress. The prodigal son disgraces family gala. Security, trained to follow the family's slightest nod, acted as the executioner. They cuffed him not with steel but with the weight of communal judgment. Ethan tried to show the smear was an accident, that the waiter had betrayed him, that Daniel had manipulated the path, hesitated, stammered, each word swallowed by an avalanche of faces. They expelled him publicly, not for what he'd done but for what he'd been made to look like. Daniel's angelic face was everywhere in the photos. Ethan was already a caricature. The humiliation burned brighter than any insult. That night, alone and filthy in a rain-slick alley, he was not merely rejected, he was hunted. In his previous life, Daniel didn't stop at a ruined reputation. He sent men who knew how to break a body and break a will. They took Ethan to a warehouse where truth meant nothing and questions were answered with bruises. For days the world shrank to the hollow of pain and the drip of water. They beat confessions from him that weren't there, told him to beg for forgiveness in exchange for mercy that never came. When they had emptied him of resistance, Daniel allowed them to finish what they'd started. In the cold light before dawn, with lungs burning and blood slick on his shirt, Ethan's life ended in the hands of strangers hired to make a lie stick. The last thing he saw before the world went black was the flash of a smile, a memory of Daniel at the ballroom steps, lips curved in that effortless, poisonous grin. It was the same smile that had presided over his final moments before fate, cruel, precise, snipped the thread of his first life. And yet, as darkness swallowed him, instead of the finality he had once known, something else wound through him, less like an end and more like a promise. Pain. That was the first thing Ethan felt, a dull ache that throbbed behind his eyes, then spread to his chest. He gasped and shot upright, his lungs dragging in air that didn't taste like dust and blood, but like perfume, champagne, and music. He blinked. He was back in the Langston ballroom. The chandeliers shimmered overhead, the crowd laughed and mingled, and Daniel, that devil in silk, was smiling from across the hall, a glass of wine in hand. The same scene, the same moment, the same trap. Ethan's heart hammered. "No, this can't be real," he whispered. He turned his shaking hands before his eyes, no bruises, no scars. The cufflinks gleamed, engraved with the Langston crest. He recognized this exact instant, the very minute before Daniel accused him of trying to drown him. His mind reeled, but a single realization anchored him like steel. I've been reborn. The gods, or fate itself, had granted him a second chance. Every humiliation, every betrayal, every scream he swallowed in that warehouse, all of it was burned into his memory. And now he could rewrite everything. He steadied his breathing, forcing calm into his voice as he approached a waiter. The same waiter who, in the last timeline, had spilled the wine that sealed his doom. Ethan smiled faintly. "Careful with that drink," he said smoothly. "You wouldn't want to ruin someone's night." The waiter froze, confused. His hand trembled. Ethan slipped a $500 bill into the man's vest pocket. "Take the next hour off, quietly." The man nodded and vanished. The chain of Daniel's manipulation had just lost its first link. Now came the hard part, turning Daniel's own lies against him. As the orchestra's tempo shifted, and Richard Langston tapped his glass to make a toast, Ethan raised his phone under the table. It was recording, hidden camera mode on, microphone boosted. He'd make sure the world would see Daniel's performance this time. Daniel began his act again, walking to the center with his signature wounded smile. "You've got a lot of nerve showing your face here, Ethan." Ethan smiled coldly. He didn't flinch, he didn't plead. This time he knew every word, every move, every lie. "Really?" Ethan interrupted loudly. "Because if memory serves, the only one who tried to drown someone was you." The crowd turned. Daniel blinked, thrown off script for the first time. What are you talking about?" Ethan tilted his head, his voice calm but cutting. "Remember the summer at Lake Windermere? The one where you thought nobody saw you push me under the water while laughing?" Murmurs rippled. Daniel's perfect expression cracked. His eyes darted to the faces around him. "You're lying," Daniel hissed. Ethan smiled, almost pitying. "Am I?" He tapped his phone screen and projected the video, a recording from years ago, taken by a forgotten drone camera near the lake, now found in the Langston Cloud archive. Daniel's voice echoed across the ballroom. "You don't deserve this family, Ethan. Stay under where you belong." Gasps filled the air. Emily dropped her glass. Their father's face turned white. Daniel froze, his carefully woven image unraveling thread by thread. The hall that once mocked Ethan now stared at Daniel like a stranger. "I came here tonight," Ethan said, his tone sharp as ice, "not for forgiveness but for truth." He straightened his tie, turned his back to them all, and walked toward the door. "This time I won't wait for you to expel me. I'm cutting you off first." And with that, Ethan Langston, the abandoned son, left the hall not as a victim, but as the storm that would one day bury them all. Silence trailed behind Ethan as he exited the ballroom, leaving the glittering crowd frozen in disbelief. The echoes of his footsteps were louder than any applause or accusation that night. Outside, snow fell softly over the city skyline, a cruel contrast to the fire raging in his chest. He had done it. He had changed fate's first page. But this was only the beginning. Hours later, inside the Langston mansion, chaos reigned. Margaret was in tears, packing furiously. "That video, where did he even get that footage?" Richard slammed his fist on the desk. "It's edited, it has to be. Daniel would never." But Daniel, the ever-perfect adopted son, sat silently, staring at the floor with clenched teeth. He hadn't anticipated this. The script had flipped, and for the first time the audience wasn't cheering. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled with false humility. "Maybe I made a mistake back then, Father. I was young." But the damage was done. The doubt had already seeped in, not enough to destroy him, but enough to crack the foundation of his mask. Meanwhile, Ethan stood at the balcony of a modest downtown hotel, phone pressed to his ear. "Mr. Reyes," he said calmly, "it's me, the man you once called a Langston." The voice on the other end hesitated. "Ethan, I didn't expect you'd ever call me again after what your family did." "That's precisely why I'm calling," Ethan replied, a smile tugging at his lips. "I want to make your rivals, my family, bleed you in." There was a pause, then quiet laughter. "You've got my attention." Marcus Reyes, CEO of the Reyes Group, was the Langstons' fiercest business competitor. Ruthless, brilliant, and utterly unforgiving, the perfect ally for a man reborn with vengeance in his veins. The next morning, Ethan returned to the mansion one last time. He didn't sneak in. He walked through the front gate head high, eyes cold. The guards hesitated but didn't stop him. When he reached the grand foyer, his parents were waiting, flanked by Daniel, who looked like a porcelain angel hiding cracks. Richard's voice was like a blade. "After what you've done, do you have any idea what you've cost this family? Our reputation." Ethan held up a single envelope and placed it on the table. "Here's my answer." Inside were legal documents, signed, sealed, and notarized. Margaret frowned. "What is this?" "My official renunciation," Ethan said flatly. "The Langston name, inheritance, all of it. I'm done." Gasps, shock. Daniel's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Ethan replied, turning away. "From this day forward, I'm no longer your son, and you," he looked Daniel in the eye, his tone sharp as frost, "are no longer my brother." He stopped by the door and looked back one last time. "I'll build something greater than the Langstons ever could, and when it stands above your ashes, remember, you made this happen." Then he left, leaving the mansion in stunned silence, just as a single snowflake melted on the envelope marked Severance. That night the headlines blazed. Langston heir publicly cuts ties with family, partners with rival empire. And in a penthouse overlooking the city, Ethan poured himself a drink. The reflection in the glass no longer showed the broken boy who once begged for love. It showed a man who would one day own the city that cast him aside. "You took my family," he whispered to the skyline, "so I'll take your world." The wind howled across the Manhattan skyline that night, rattling the tall glass windows of the Rays Group Tower. Inside the top-floor office, Ethan stood across from Marcus Rays, the man once called the Iron Wolf of Wall Street. Marcus was older, in his late 40s, with silver hair slicked back and a gaze that could pierce through stone. He studied Ethan in silence for a long time, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "You've got fire in you, kid," Marcus said finally, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. "But fire without control burns the one who wields it." Ethan accepted the glass, his grip steady. "I'm not here to burn myself, Mr. Rays. I'm here to burn them." Marcus chuckled, deep, dangerous, approving. "Then let's talk business." They sat, contracts, plans, projections, the table filled with blueprints of vengeance disguised as enterprise. Ethan laid out his knowledge, every future market trend, every hidden merger, every crisis that would rock the economy in the next 5 years. He spoke with surgical precision, detailing which companies would rise, which would fall, and which could be used as stepping stones. Marcus listened, skeptical at first, then intrigued, then visibly impressed. "No one should know these things," Marcus murmured, tapping his pen, "unless you've seen the future." Ethan smiled faintly. "Let's just say I've been given a second chance to play a game I already lost once." Within weeks, their joint venture, Eternum Group, was born, a sleek, mysterious corporate entity that moved like a shadow through the business world. They bought out collapsing tech firms before the market crash, acquired undervalued energy assets, and invested in a biotech company on the verge of a historic breakthrough. Every move was perfect, almost prophetic. Behind the scenes, Ethan quietly targeted every Langston investment. When they expanded into clean energy, Eternum launched a better one. When they tried to secure a merger, Ethan's lawyers would beat them to the table every time. The Langstons began to bleed money, slowly, quietly, fatally. One night, as the city glowed beneath the rain, Marcus approached Ethan on the balcony of their new skyscraper. "You've done something remarkable," Marcus said, lighting a cigar. "In a few months, you've brought the Langstons to their knees." Ethan's eyes were cold. "Not yet. Kneeling isn't enough. I want them begging." Marcus smirked. "You remind me of myself, back when I still believed revenge could fix the past." Ethan turned to him, his voice sharp. "Revenge doesn't fix the past, it rewrites the future." Meanwhile, across the city, in the Langston boardroom, chaos. Stock prices had fallen 18% in a week. Investors were pulling out. Richard slammed his fist on the table. "How is Eternum outbidding us every time? Who are they?" Daniel adjusted his tie, his frustration masked by false calm. "I'll find out, Father. Whoever they are, they're targeting us specifically." He paused, then narrowed his eyes. "And I have a feeling I know who's behind it." The boardroom fell silent. Margaret turned pale. "You don't mean Ethan?" Daniel's lips curled into that all-too-familiar smile. "Oh, he's back, but if he wants war." He leaned forward, eyes glinting with malice. "Then I'll show him what hell looks like." Across the city, Ethan watched the breaking news on a giant screen. Langston Industries under pressure. New competitor rises. His reflection stared back at him, sharp and composed. "You took everything from me, Daniel," he murmured. "Now I'll take everything you have, piece by piece, until there's nothing left." And when thunder cracked across the skyline, it sounded almost like applause. A storm brewed over New York, not of rain and thunder, but of money, power, and betrayal. On the surface, Langston Industries and Eternum Group were just 2 competing corporations locked in a fierce business race. But beneath that glossy facade, a war was raging, quiet, ruthless, and deeply personal. Ethan had transformed in a matter of months. The once scorned son now wore tailored suits, moved with confidence, and commanded boardrooms like a general on the battlefield. His knowledge of the future gave him a godlike edge. He predicted market swings, intercepted Langston contracts, and leaked just enough information to make investors doubt Daniel's leadership. Every hit was subtle, small enough not to draw suspicion, but devastating enough to leave cracks. And Daniel was starting to crack. At the Langston Tower, Daniel sat in his office, staring at the latest reports. Quarterly losses, delayed shipments, a sudden withdrawal of foreign investors. His phone buzzed, another message from an anonymous source. "You can't fight fate." Daniel slammed the phone down, breathing heavily. For the first time in his life, he felt fear. "Who are you?" he muttered, gripping the desk. "Show yourself." But the only answer was silence, and the slow unraveling of everything he'd built. Across town, Ethan watched the chaos unfold from his penthouse. Marcus entered, a folder in hand. "The Langstons just lost another major supplier," he said with a smirk. "Your plan's working better than expected." Ethan flipped through the documents, expression calm. "Good, but don't stop there. I want their creditors to start doubting them, quietly. No public strikes yet. We'll drain their resources before we expose them." Marcus nodded approvingly. "You're colder than I expected, Ethan. You sure you're not enjoying this a little too much?" Ethan gave a faint, tired smile. "Enjoyment has nothing to do with it. This is justice." He looked out at the skyline, where the Langston Tower's lights still shone brightly. "When they finally fall, I'll be there to watch it go dark." But in the shadows, someone else was watching. A woman, tall, sharp-eyed, and dressed in black, sat in a sleek car parked near Eternham Tower. Her phone screen displayed Ethan's face from the latest business magazine cover. She zoomed in, lips curling. "Ethan Langston, so you're the one making waves." Her earpiece crackled. "Madam, should we proceed?" She smiled. "Yes, let's see how far the fallen heir is willing to go." Her name was Celeste, Daniel's secret weapon, a corporate spy, trained in manipulation, seduction, and destruction. Daniel had unleashed her to find Ethan's weakness. Days later, Ethan attended a high-profile charity gala hosted by the city's elite. Cameras flashed, deals were whispered, and enemies disguised themselves with smiles. As he turned from a conversation, a familiar scent caught his attention, jasmine and fire. She stood by the balcony, elegant and unreadable, her dress glimmering under the city lights. "You must be Mr. Ethan Langston," she said smoothly, "the man who's rewriting New York's business rules." Ethan smiled politely. "And you are?" "Celeste," she said, extending a gloved hand. "Just someone fascinated by your rise." Their eyes locked, her gaze sharp, his cautious. Ethan didn't know it yet, but the first true counterattack of this silent war had just begun. Far away, Daniel received a text. "Celeste has made contact. The game is on." Daniel smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Good. Let's see how my dear brother handles a trap dressed like temptation." The gala lights shimmered like 1,000 stars trapped in crystal. But for Ethan, the only thing that gleamed brighter than the chandeliers was the woman standing before him. Celeste. Her eyes were dangerous, not because they burned with passion, but because they reflected intelligence, calculation, and something he knew all too well: intent. Still, Ethan smiled. "Fascinated by my rise, you said. That's rare. Most people in this city only pay attention when someone falls." Celeste's lips curved. "Oh, I find both equally entertaining. The rise reveals strength, the fall exposes truth. Tell me, Mr. Langston, which do you prefer?" Ethan tilted his head, studying her. "Neither. I prefer control." Her smile deepened, subtle approval hiding behind a mask of curiosity. Control him. Dangerous word in your line of work, especially when you've made so many enemies. Enemies? Ethan echoed. No, Miss Celeste, I don't make enemies, I make lessons. A soft laugh escaped her lips, the kind meant to disarm. I'll remember that. They clinked glasses, the champagne fizzing like the tension between them. Later that night, when Ethan returned to his penthouse, the conversation still echoed in his mind. He'd met hundreds of people in his second life, investors, rivals, parasites in silk suits, but none unsettled him like Celeste. She was too perfect, too poised. He poured a drink and stood by the window, watching the reflection of the city ripple in the glass. She's not here to flirt, he muttered. She's here to fish. And Ethan knew exactly whose pond she swam in. Meanwhile, across the city in Daniel's private penthouse, Celeste leaned against the marble counter, removing one diamond earring. He's sharper than you described, she said, sipping from a crystal glass. Cautious, he sees too much. Daniel smiled, lounging on the couch like a man who believed he controlled the world. Everyone cracks eventually. You'll find his weakness. And if he doesn't have one? Daniel's gaze darkened. Then make one. He stood walking behind her, his tone venomously soft. Seduce him, win his trust, then rip his world apart from the inside the way he's doing to mine. Celeste gave a short laugh, swirling her drink. You sound almost jealous, Daniel. Jealous? He scoffed. He's just a broken toy that doesn't know when to stay broken. But deep down, Daniel's arrogance trembled. He knew Ethan's rise wasn't luck, it was destiny clawing its way back. And destiny terrified him. The following week, Ethan and Marcus attended a business conference in London, a perfect opportunity to secure an international investor. What Ethan didn't expect was to find Celeste there again, elegantly dressed, with that same faint smile. Mr. Langston, she greeted smoothly, handing him a glass of water. You looked like you needed this. Ethan took it, eyes narrowing. You travel fast. I follow opportunities, she said lightly, and lately every opportunity seems to orbit around you. Marcus raised a brow after she left. Pretty but too confident. That's not a socialite, Ethan, that's a snake. Ethan nodded slightly. Exactly, which means she's worth keeping close until I find who's holding her leash. That night, Ethan had his tech team run a background check on Celeste, and what they found was nothing. No digital footprint, no history, no past. She was a ghost, and ghosts didn't appear without reason. Still, Ethan didn't cut her off. He let her circle closer, let her believe she was winning. Because if there was one thing he'd learned from Daniel's lies, it was this. Sometimes the best way to kill a trap is to step into it willingly. Across the ocean, Daniel watched a live security feed of the London conference. When he saw Ethan shake Celeste's hand again, he smirked. Good, keep dancing with her brother, he whispered, because when she strikes, I'll be there to watch you fall. But for once, Daniel was underestimating the wrong man. Ethan wasn't the same naive son he destroyed years ago. This time, he was the one pulling the strings. London city of power, masks, and lies. The conference had ended, but the real game was only just beginning. Ethan sat in his hotel suite, sleeves rolled up, reviewing documents glowing across multiple screens. Eternum Group's next acquisition was moments away from execution, a biotech firm that would become the key to the next decade's medicine market. But instead of watching the deal close, his attention was fixed on the reflection in the glass window. There she was, Celeste, standing on the balcony, city lights painting her silhouette in silver. She looked like a scene from a dream, and yet Ethan knew she was sent to be his nightmare. Couldn't sleep, she asked softly without turning. You seem very comfortable walking into a man's room at midnight. Ethan said, his tone calm, measured. She smiled faintly. You left the door open. Maybe I wanted to see who'd walk through. The tension hung heavy, each word like a chess move. Celeste stepped closer, the scent of jasmine and danger following her. You fascinate me, Ethan. You move like a man who's seen the future. He met her gaze, unflinching. And you move like a woman trying to rewrite it. For a moment, silence. Then laughter, soft, genuine, or at least good enough to sound that way. Taché, she said. Ethan poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to her. Their fingers brushed briefly, a spark, deliberate and dangerous. Tell me, Celeste, he murmured, who sent you? Her eyes flickered, only for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Ethan's instinct confirmed what his heart already knew. I see, he said quietly, so it's Daniel. Celeste froze. You think too highly of yourself. Ethan smiled faintly, turning his gaze back to the skyline. No, I think just enough to stay alive. That same night, while Celeste slept in the guest suite, by Ethan's invitation, a small device hidden in her handbag transmitted data across the Atlantic to Daniel's encrypted network. Except this time, it was Daniel receiving it. It was Ethan. He had his tech division intercept and reroute every byte before it reached Langston's servers. For every secret she thought she was stealing, Ethan was feeding her false data, poisoned intelligence designed to choke Daniel's empire from within. He was turning her mission into a weapon. You wanted a spy, Daniel, he thought coldly. Now you have one, just not the way you think. Days passed. Ethan and Celeste grew closer strategically. Dinners, business meetings, long talks under city lights. To anyone watching, she looked like his new confidant. But beneath the surface, a silent war of perception raged. She tested him with half-truths and probing questions. He baited her with fake vulnerabilities and lies wrapped in sincerity. Both were hunters, both were pretending to be prey. Back in New York, Daniel grew impatient. Why hasn't she reported back? He snapped, packing his office. What's taking so long? His assistant hesitated. She's spending more time with him than expected, sir. He may suspect. Daniel's hand slammed onto the desk. No, she wouldn't dare betray me. But doubt crept in anyway like cracks through ice. Still, he murmured, if she doesn't deliver soon, she'll be eliminated. Meanwhile, in London, Celeste watched Ethan from the shadows of his study. He was reading calm, composed, untouchable. Every instinct told her he knew. And yet, the man who was supposed to be her mark was starting to feel like something else entirely. Not a target. Not an enemy. Something in between. Something dangerous. The next morning, Ethan entered her room. Celeste was ready, her smile perfected. But his words struck like a blade. Tell Daniel, he said, voice low and unshakable, that I hope he's enjoying the reports you've been sending him. Her heart stopped. You what? He tossed her phone onto the table screen, glowing with intercepted messages. They were never reaching him. You've been talking to me the whole time. Celeste's mask cracked for the first time. Why haven't you turned me in? She demanded. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes colder than glass. Because you're more useful alive. I don't destroy my enemies immediately, Celeste. I let them help me finish the job first. She stared at him, breath unsteady, and for the first time she didn't see a victim or a businessman. She saw a king in the making. Across the ocean, Daniel's phone buzzed. A new message. Phase 1 complete, he trusts me. Daniel smiled, unaware that the message was sent by Ethan himself, using Celeste's encrypted ID. Let's see how deep your arrogance runs, brother. The storm had finally begun. 3 weeks after the London summit, news outlets across the world buzzed with breaking headlines. Langston Group faces sudden audit after anonymous tip. Hidden financial discrepancies shake New York's elite. Daniel Langston's empire, built on lies, bribery, and stolen deals, was cracking at the edges. And the source of it all? Ethan. From the shadows of his penthouse, Ethan watched as the first domino fell. The same board of directors who once threw him out like garbage now trembled under scrutiny. The whispers of corruption spread like wildfire, and in every whisper was a seed of truth, planted carefully by him. Celeste sat across from him, pale from what she'd just read. "You're going after Langston Group head-on?" she asked softly. "That's suicide, Ethan. They still control half the city's media, their connections go." He cut her off. "They're already dying, Celeste. They just don't know it yet." He turned his laptop to face her. On the screen was a real-time display of stock fluctuations, Langston's shares plunging by 14% in a single hour. "You see, I'm not attacking their empire," Ethan continued, his tone calm but venomous. "I'm letting them destroy themselves." "How?" she whispered. He leaned back, eyes gleaming like sharpened steel. "By using the one thing they value most, greed." 2 months earlier, Ethan had quietly purchased controlling shares in Helios Dynamics, a rising tech firm rumored to be Langston's next acquisition target. Except Helios didn't exist. It was a shell company created by Eternum Group, filled with fabricated patents and artificial valuation reports. And Daniel, blinded by his need to dominate every market, had taken the bait. Langston Group invested $400 million into Helios. Money that would soon vanish. When Helios collapsed, due to a data breach, Langston's name would be dragged through every court and every headline. The trap was flawless. "You're smiling," Celeste said, studying him. "I'm watching a man who destroyed my life fall into his own grave," Ethan replied coldly. "And yet," she said carefully, "you're becoming more like him every day." That struck deeper than she knew. For a moment the mask slipped. The steel in Ethan's gaze cracked just slightly, revealing something human beneath. "The difference," he said quietly, "is that I remember what it's like to have nothing. He never will." Across the city, Daniel was losing control. "Who the hell leaked the audit information?" he shouted, throwing a glass against the wall. His assistant stammered, "We don't know, sir, but Helios stock." "I own Helios stock." "That's the problem," she said weakly. "It's collapsing." Daniel froze, confusion bleeding into rage. "That's impossible. Helios is the next big." But before he could finish, his phone rang. "Unknown number." He answered. "Who is this?" A calm voice spoke. "The man you should have never framed." Daniel's blood ran cold. "Ethan." "You have no idea how deep this goes, brother," Ethan said evenly. "Every move you make, every lie you tell, every ally you trust, I'm already there." "You think this will save you," Daniel hissed. "You're still nothing without the Langston name." Ethan chuckled softly. "You're right, but the irony is soon neither will you." The line went dead. 2 days later, Langston Group's assets were frozen pending investigation. Their competitors circled like vultures. And on the front page of Forbes, a new headline blazed in gold. Eternum Group's meteoric rise. Young CEO Ethan Kane declared the new king of Wall Street. Ethan stood before the window of his Manhattan office, the skyline reflected in his glass. His revenge was no longer a secret. It was a spectacle. Celeste entered quietly, her expression unreadable. "He'll come after you," she warned. "Daniel's pride won't let this go." Ethan nodded. "I'm counting on it." "Why?" He turned to her, eyes cold as winter steel. "Because I'm done waiting. It's time he learns this king doesn't forgive." That night Daniel sat alone in his mansion, surrounded by silence and shattered glass. His empire was collapsing. His name tainted. And for the first time in years, he was afraid. When his phone rang again, he didn't answer. Because deep down, he already knew who was calling. Daniel Langston had always believed in perfection. His perfect image, perfect lies, perfect control over his family and empire. That illusion shattered in the early hours of a gray New York morning. The boardroom of Langston Group was silent. Phones buzzed. Computers flashed red warnings. The top executives, once loyal to Daniel, now exchanged anxious glances. "Sir, the creditors, they're pulling everything," one stammered. Daniel slammed his fist against the polished table. "This is impossible. Eternum, this Ethan, he can't do this." "Sir, they've traced every Helios transaction. It was manipulated." Daniel's face paled. The walls he had built around his empire, the lies, the intimidation, the control, were crumbling brick by brick. And outside the room, the media was circling like sharks. Meanwhile, Ethan watched from his office, sipping whiskey, calm as a predator. Marcus Reyes leaned against the desk. "You've taken everything from him in under 6 months. How does it feel?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He watched the city lights shimmer across the skyline. "It feels like justice." "Justice, huh?" Marcus said, smirking. "I'd call it revenge." Ethan finally turned, a faint, cold smile curling his lips. "Call it whatever you want. The world only remembers the results." Daniel's next move was desperation itself. He called Celeste his loyal operative, his secret weapon. Find him, stop him, do whatever it takes. Celeste, however, now worked both sides. She smiled faintly into the phone. "Yes, Daniel, whatever it takes," she said, carefully choosing her words. Every lie Daniel had built his life on had been dismantled. Every ally had been bought, betrayed, or outsmarted. Even Emily, Daniel's innocent sister, had begun to see through his web of lies. She confronted him quietly in his mansion. "Daniel, it's all true, isn't it? Everything Ethan said." His lips twitched. "He's lying," he barked. "No," she said softly, tears brimming. "I remember things differently now. I can see what he really is." Daniel's mask of perfection cracked for the first time, and the golden sun of the Langston legacy finally faced the reflection he had always ignored, a monster in angel's clothing. Ethan, watching from afar, knew this was only the beginning. His first strike had crippled Daniel's finances, exposed his lies, and undermined his allies. But the psychological blow, the unraveling of his perfect image, was far more powerful. Soon, Daniel would realize that money could no longer save him, that prestige was meaningless, that even the people he trusted most might turn against him. Ethan's revenge wasn't about wealth. It was about watching the golden sun fall from his throne. "Every lie, every betrayal, every false smile, it ends now," Ethan whispered. And in the shadows, the first pieces of Daniel's empire began to crumble irreparably. Ethan didn't just want revenge. He wanted total control. While Daniel's empire bled, Ethan quietly built a network of influence stronger than anything his former family could imagine. In a sleek black office atop Eternum Tower, Ethan met with his inner circle, Marcus Reyes, top legal minds and financial strategists. Maps, stock charts, and intelligence reports were spread across the table like a war map. "Langston's resources are evaporating," Marcus said. "By next quarter, they'll be begging for help if they survive that long." Ethan nodded, eyes cold and sharp. "We don't just want their empire to collapse," he said. "We want it hollow. Every ally turned, every creditor broken, every secret exposed. They need to feel the weight of every decision they ever made, especially Daniel." Meanwhile, Daniel's phone rang incessantly. Investors withdrew, media inquiries piled up, and even his closest board members questioned his competence. He was isolated completely. Emily had stopped returning his calls. Margaret refused to meet him. Even Daniel's perfect image in public appearances began to fracture as journalists caught on to inconsistencies in his story. Daniel's golden facade, polished for decades, was now a cracked mask revealing panic, arrogance, and desperation. Ethan, however, stayed in the shadows. He used Daniel's own spies against him, leaking selective information that forced the Langston group into defensive, exhausting maneuvers. Every press release, every market move, every announcement was engineered by Ethan to destabilize them further. Celeste, now fully loyal to Ethan, fed him Daniel's responses in real time. Every plan Daniel thought was secret became a trap, executed exactly as Ethan intended. "He's predictable," Ethan said softly, sipping his whiskey, "and predictable men die first." Marcus chuckled. "You've created a king in shadows. Everyone's afraid to see who really rules the city." Ethan's eyes gleamed. "Not just the city. Soon, even the Langstons will kneel at the edge of nothing, and they'll understand the true cost of betrayal." The media began reporting a new phenomenon: Eternum Group's unprecedented acquisitions, Marcus Ray's sudden partnerships, and the mysterious young CEO orchestrating it all. Daniel could no longer hide in the shadows. Every move he made seemed wrong, slow, or desperate. Ethan's empire wasn't just growing. It was strategically consuming everything the Langstons had ever controlled. Soon, Ethan whispered to himself, "You'll know what it feels like to be abandoned, to be powerless, to realize the perfect son is nothing but a hollow lie." Daniel sat alone in his office that night, watching stock tickers bleed red. "How did he do this?" he muttered. "He's everywhere." The truth hit him like a hammer. Ethan had outplayed him at every turn. The golden son of Langston, once untouchable, was now reduced to a man watching his empire collapse, powerless and unaware of the final strikes yet to come. And above the city, in the penthouse of Eternum Tower, Ethan smiled. The Empire of Shadows was ready. Ethan Langston's rise had been silent, precise, and unrelenting. But now, the time had come for the final act of humiliation, the one that would strip Daniel of every shred of pride he had left. A gala was announced under the guise of a philanthropy fundraiser for the city's elite. Invitations went out, cameras were scheduled, and Daniel, ever the showman, prepared to appear as the perfect son once again. He didn't know that tonight the world would see the real Daniel Langston. Ethan arrived in a custom tuxedo, sharp, impeccable, commanding. He wasn't just attending, he was orchestrating. Celeste followed discreetly, ensuring every move was monitored. As the Langston family mingled with investors and socialites, Ethan triggered the first phase of his plan. Screens across the ballroom flickered to life. A soft murmur spread through the crowd. Then the footage began. Videos of Daniel's lies, manipulations, and sabotage played on loop. Secret bribes to investors. Faked agreements to cover Helios losses. Personal betrayals of his family, including attempts to frame Ethan. The room fell silent. Glasses clinked awkwardly, champagne trembled in hands. Margaret gasped. Richard's face went pale. Daniel's smile faltered. What is this?" he stammered. Ethan stepped forward, voice steady and cold. "This is the truth. Every lie you told, every betrayal you committed, laid bare for the people who once trusted you." The elite whispered, cameras snapped, and social media lit up in real time. Daniel's reputation, carefully curated over decades, shattered in minutes. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her brother. "How could you do all of this?" Daniel's mask broke completely. I did it for the family, for us," he cried, but the words rang hollow. Ethan's expression didn't soften. "No, Daniel, you did it for yourself, and now the world knows exactly who you are." The final insult, Ethan approached the stage calm and regal. "I came back to claim what should have been mine," he said, glancing at his once family. "But this isn't about money nor a title. This is about truth, justice, and consequences. Daniel, you've had your stage. Tonight you're exposed. Tonight your reign ends." Daniel's face twisted in rage and fear. "You think this ends it? I'll ruin you." Ethan tilted his head, a faint smirk forming. "I've already won. You've lost everything you never truly earned." By the end of the night, headlines screamed across the city. "The Langston Empire crumbles. Daniel exposed as fraud and manipulator." "Long-lost son, Ethan Kane declares revenge complete, legacy rewritten." Daniel, once the golden son, now sat humiliated, a hollow man before the very elite who had worshipped him. Ethan didn't gloat. He simply watched, letting the collapse speak for itself. Revenge isn't sweet, he thought. It's justice served cold. The morning after the gala, New York awoke to a storm not of weather, but of whispers, rumors, and undeniable truth. Every news outlet, social media feed, and boardroom echoed the same message. Daniel Langston was finished. Ethan didn't celebrate. He didn't call for fanfare or let the media chase him. Instead, he moved like a shadow across the city, quietly solidifying his empire. His Eternum Group offices had become a fortress of power. Investments multiplied. Allies were loyal, not because of fear, but because Ethan earned their respect. Competitors either bowed or fell. And most importantly, he had cut all ties with the Langstons. The severance was formal, legal, and absolute. A letter arrived at the Langston mansion, elegantly sealed. "To the family I once called mine. I am no longer Ethan Langston. I am Ethan Kane. I sever all connections with you effective immediately. Do not contact me. Do not attempt to reconcile. Your choices ensured this path. Sincerely, Ethan Kane." Richard Langston read it aloud to the family, shaking. Margaret sobbed. Emily's eyes, though conflicted, revealed the truth. Daniel's lies had not only destroyed Ethan, they had also destroyed the family's chance at redemption. Daniel's fury was palpable. "He can't do this, he's mine." Ethan's message was clear. He was no longer theirs to control. Meanwhile, Ethan walked through the city streets, observing the empire he had built. Buildings, businesses, and investments, every corner of the skyline reflected his meticulous planning. He didn't smile, not yet. Because this was more than power. This was proof. The abandoned son had risen, not to destroy for pleasure but to reclaim justice. In the following months, Langston Group's remaining assets were quietly absorbed by Ethan's allies. Daniel attempted petty sabotage, but found every plan anticipated, countered, or leaked. Investors deserted the Langstons, leaving Daniel and his family isolated, powerless, and desperate. Ethan's empire grew not through brute force, but through foresight, precision, and patience. Marcus Reyes, watching from his office, shook his head in admiration. "You didn't just win, you rewrote the rules." Ethan glanced over the city skyline, his jaw tight. "They underestimated me once. They won't again, ever." And in the shadows, a new piece of the plan moved into position. One final strike that would ensure Daniel's fall was complete, irreversible, and poetic. The city was quiet that night, but for Ethan Kane, silence meant opportunity. Months of planning, strategizing, and waiting had led to this moment. Daniel Langston wasn't just weakened. He was exposed, humiliated, and isolated. But Ethan didn't crave mere destruction. He wanted absolute reckoning. Ethan had contacted Victoria Hayes, a woman Daniel had betrayed years ago. A betrayal so cruel that even Daniel thought it would be forgotten. Victoria arrived at Eternum Tower, her expression a mixture of resolve and cautious curiosity. Ethan greeted her warmly but firmly. "Victoria, You know what he did to you. I want to give you the opportunity to make him pay in the way he can't ignore." Her eyes widened slightly, realizing the implication. You want me to confront him?" Ethan nodded. "Not just confront. You'll deliver the justice he's always avoided, but I'll ensure you're protected every step of the way." Victoria hesitated, then slowly nodded. "I've waited a long time for this." Meanwhile, Daniel was unaware that the trap was closing. He sat in his office, nursing a whiskey, checking his dwindling stock and investor confidence. Every call, every email, every move seemed already anticipated. When his phone rang, it was a number he didn't recognize. "Hello," a calm, familiar voice replied. "Daniel, it's time to face the truth." His stomach dropped. "Who, what?" "Look outside," the voice said. On the balcony below, Victoria Hayes appeared, standing in the light of the city skyline. The same woman Daniel had thought powerless years ago, now poised, confident, and unafraid. He froze. "Victoria, what?" "This is your reckoning," she said, her voice unwavering. Daniel's first instinct was to call security to retreat, to assert control, but it was too late. Ethan had orchestrated everything. Cameras, legal observers, media, everything was in place to expose Daniel completely, and for Victoria to deliver the final blow. Inside Eternham Tower, Ethan watched the live feed of the confrontation. A faint smile curved his lips. This is the moment all those betrayals come home, he thought. Every lie Daniel told, every life he ruined, every trust he betrayed, it ends here. Victoria approached Daniel, her eyes blazing. "Do you remember what you did?" she asked coldly. "Do you remember the pain you caused?" Daniel stammered, trying to explain, to deny, to plead, but nothing worked. The world could see him for what he truly was. Ethan raised his glass silently. "Let the final judgment begin," he whispered. The city held its breath that night. Daniel Langston, the so-called Golden Son, stood frozen on the balcony of his penthouse. The wind whipped at his hair, but the cold outside could not match the icy realization creeping into his bones. Victoria Hayes approached, her steps measured, her gaze unwavering. The cameras Ethan had placed captured everything. This was public, this was final, and there was no escape. "Do you remember me, Daniel?" Victoria's voice cut through the silence. "Do you remember everything you took?" Daniel's lips trembled. I. You've spent your life thinking you could manipulate, lie, and betray without consequence," Victoria continued, her tone slicing sharper than any blade. "But the truth always finds its way." She held up a file, documents, evidence, contracts, proof of every scheme, every betrayal, every hidden crime Daniel had thought buried forever. The whispers of the crowd, broadcast live, filled the penthouse. Investors, media, and city elites were watching. The man who had once commanded respect now faced total exposure. Daniel tried to argue, to defend himself, to twist the narrative, but it was futile. Every lie, every manipulation, every fraud was documented. The empire he had built on deceit was collapsing live before his eyes. Victoria stepped closer. "And now, Daniel, you will feel the consequences through the eyes of those you wronged. You'll understand what it means to be powerless, to be betrayed, to be humiliated." With that, she handed the documents to the authorities Ethan had aligned, ensuring legal consequences, financial ruin, and public accountability. Daniel's face paled as realization struck. He had been cornered, outmaneuvered, and completely exposed. From a discreet balcony across the city, Ethan watched the unfolding scene with a cold satisfaction. "This is justice," he murmured. "Not vengeance for the sake of hate, but for the sake of truth." He didn't gloat. He didn't revel. He simply observed the culmination of years of betrayal, planning, and rebirth. By the end of the night, Daniel Langston's reputation was in tatters. Langston Group's remaining assets were seized or frozen. Victoria Hayes had reclaimed her dignity and her power. Ethan Kane's empire stood stronger than ever, untarnished and unstoppable. Ethan's phone buzzed. It was Marcus Ray's. "You did it. You didn't just win. You became untouchable." Ethan smiled faintly, the city skyline reflecting in his eyes. "This isn't about being untouchable. It's about making sure that betrayal always carries a price." And in that moment, Ethan Kane, once a boy abandoned by his own family, finally stood at the pinnacle of his rebirth. The Langston mansion, once a symbol of wealth and power, was now quiet, eerily quiet. The family who had scorned their own son now faced the consequences of their actions, and the emptiness of their empire mirrored the hollowness of their hearts. Richard Langston paced the marble floors, wringing his hands. Everything is gone." Margaret sat on the edge of the sofa, tears streaming silently. "How could we have been so blind, so foolish?" Emily, the only one still holding fragments of conscience, stood silently in the corner, watching her family crumble. "You wanted the perfect son," she said softly. "You got him and you broke him, and now he's gone." Daniel, once confident and arrogant, now sat slumped, humiliated and powerless. Every ally he had leaned on had abandoned him. Every deal he had orchestrated had unraveled. And the city, the investors, and the world had seen him for what he truly was. Meanwhile, Ethan Kane didn't celebrate in public. He didn't parade his victory. From the top floor of Eternham Tower, he gazed out over the city skyline, the lights of Manhattan stretching endlessly before him. Marcus Ray's approached, leaning casually against the balcony railing. "You've finished them. The Empire of Shadows is complete." Ethan's expression was calm, almost serene. "They were never just an empire to me," he said quietly. "They were a lesson, and I've learned mine. Betrayal has a price, and they've paid it in full." "And the future?" Marcus asked. "Will they rise again?" Ethan shook his head. "Some betrayals cannot be forgiven. Some mistakes are permanent. I've learned that the hard way, and now they have too." Across the city, the Langston family tried to salvage their reputation, but the damage was irreparable. Investors refused to trust them. Board members resigned, and in the court of public opinion, they were already condemned. Daniel's phone rang constantly, filled with threats, inquiries, and rejections. Each ring was a reminder of his failure, a symphony of the ruin he had brought upon himself. Even Emily and Margaret were left to grapple with their own guilt, haunted by the knowledge that they had chosen a swindler over their flesh and blood. Ethan, however, moved forward, his empire stronger and more influential than ever. Eternham Group had secured international partnerships. Investments flourished in tech, biotech, and energy. Strategic alliances with former competitors ensured the empire's unchallenged dominance. And yet Ethan didn't just grow in wealth, he grew in power, influence, and reputation. He had reclaimed his name, rewritten his destiny, and become a man untouchable not just by business, but by the betrayals of the past. That night, as the city lights shimmered beneath him, Ethan thought of his family, of the pain they caused, and of the rebirth that had brought him here. Some betrayals destroy you. Some betrayals forge you. Ethan Kane had been forged, and now nothing could stop him. The city of New York had changed, not because of law or luck or politics, but because Ethan Kane had emerged as an unstoppable force. Where once the Langstons had dictated the flow of money and influence, now Eternham Group set the pace. Ethan stood in the boardroom overlooking the skyline, surrounded by Marcus, Victoria Hayes, and his trusted executives. Contracts, blueprints, and strategies were spread across the polished table. "Our next move?" Marcus asked. Ethan's gaze was unwavering, almost serene. Innovation, influence, and legacy. We don't just compete, we define the rules. Victoria nodded, impressed by the calm precision of the man she had witnessed orchestrate the collapse of an empire. You're not just a CEO anymore, Ethan. You're a king. A king who remembers the cost of betrayal, Ethan replied, voice quiet but commanding. Power without principles is worthless. This empire will rise, but it will rise on justice, foresight, and respect, not lies. Across the city, whispers spread. The name Ethan Kane was on every lip. Investors sought him out. Innovators wanted to join him. Even former rivals realized that challenging him now meant certain ruin. Eternum Tower became a symbol of intelligence and strategy, of patience and precision, of the man who had once been cast aside and had returned stronger than ever. Back in New York's elite circles, the Langstons' presence faded. Their empire was fractured, their name tainted, and their influence shattered. Ethan had done more than take power. He had reshaped the hierarchy of the city itself. Even the media recognized it. Ethan Kane, the man who rewrote New York's business game. From abandoned son to king of Wall Street, a story of betrayal, rebirth, and triumph. And while the accolades poured in, Ethan never forgot the pain that had fueled him. Every empire begins with a foundation. Mine began with betrayal. Late one night, Ethan walked alone across the terrace of Eternum Tower. The wind whipped through his hair, the city lights flickering below. He whispered softly, "They chose a swindler over me. They believed I was nothing, and yet here I stand." His reflection glimmered in the glass, a man transformed by fire, betrayal, and rebirth. "This is only the beginning," he murmured. "The legacy of Kane will last far longer than the mistakes of the Langstons ever could." The city held its breath once more, though this time it was not for scandal or gossip. It was for the final reckoning, the last act in the saga of betrayal, revenge, and rebirth. Daniel Langston sat alone in his once grand office, the skyline outside a mocking reminder of all he had lost. The empire he had built, the influence he had wielded, the golden image he had maintained, it had all crumbled. His phone buzzed endlessly with rejections, threats, and the whispers of former allies. His lawyers shook their heads. The board was in disarray. Investors had abandoned him completely. And worst of all, the world had seen him for what he truly was. A man who traded love and loyalty for greed, deceit, and selfish ambition. Ethan Kane, perched in his Eternum Tower office, watched the city below with unwavering calm. Marcus leaned against the railing, impressed. "It's over, isn't it?" Ethan shook his head slightly, a faint smile crossing his face. "Almost. Victory is not just taking everything from them. It's ensuring that the lesson they learn can never be ignored. Daniel must face what he created, and the world must see the truth." Celeste, standing nearby, added quietly, "And he will. You've made sure there's no escape." "Exactly," Ethan said. "This is the final curtain." The next day, a carefully orchestrated press conference was held. Daniel was summoned, legally bound and publicly humiliated. The media, investors, and city elite watched as evidence of his betrayals, financial fraud, manipulations, and personal betrayals, was laid bare. Victoria Hayes, standing with Ethan by her side, spoke with authority. Daniel Langston was given every opportunity to act with integrity, but he chose deceit. He betrayed family, friends, and partners. Today, justice is not delayed. The cameras flashed, capturing every moment. Daniel's protests fell on deaf ears. Every word of excuse, every plea, every denial was drowned in the overwhelming weight of truth. Ethan, calm and composed, remained silent, allowing Daniel's own actions to speak. By the end of the conference, Daniel's empire was completely dismantled. Legal action ensured he would face consequences that could never be undone. The Langstons' public image was irreparably destroyed, and Ethan Kane stood as the unshakable figure at the pinnacle of New York's elite. Daniel, once untouchable, now faced a reality he could not escape. The golden sun had fallen, and the man they had cast aside had risen higher than anyone could imagine. That night, Ethan stood alone on the terrace of Eternham Tower, the city lights sprawling endlessly below. "They chose a swindler over me," he whispered. "They humiliated me, betrayed me, tried to destroy me. And yet—" He looked up at the stars, a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. "Here I am, reborn, untouchable and victorious." The city was his, the empire was his, justice had been served. And as the night wind blew through the tower, Ethan Kane knew one thing with absolute certainty. Betrayal has a price, and some prices can never be forgiven. The city of New York had changed forever. Ethan Kane wasn't just a businessman, he was a symbol, a testament to rebirth, resilience, and the unyielding power of those who refuse to be broken. Every skyscraper, every corporation, every influence he wielded bore the mark of his intelligence, patience, and unshakable will. The Langstons were shadows of the family they once were. Daniel languished under legal scrutiny, facing penalties, bankruptcies, and the irreversible consequences of his greed. Margaret and Richard retreated into private lives, haunted by the knowledge that their choices had condemned their family. Emily, the only one who retained some conscience, quietly distanced herself, carrying the weight of regret. They had learned too late that betraying blood over convenience brought nothing but ruin. Ethan, however, had no desire for vengeance beyond justice. He had rebuilt himself from ashes, transforming betrayal into a foundation stronger than steel. With Marcus, Victoria, and Celeste by his side, Eternham Group became not just a business empire, but a legacy of vision and integrity, standing tall as a beacon for those who dared to dream and persevere. Standing atop Eternham Tower, Ethan gazed over the city, the night air crisp against his face. "I was abandoned, betrayed, and cast aside," he murmured. "I was made to suffer for the sins of others, but I survived. I grew stronger. I reclaimed my life." He smiled faintly, a rare warmth flickering in his eyes. "This empire, this legacy, it is not built on lies nor on cruelty. It is built on patience, foresight, and justice. The world now knows my name, Ethan Kane, and they will remember it forever." Ethan's phone buzzed, a message from Victoria. "They're gone, no more shadows from the past. It's finally yours." He set the phone down and looked toward the horizon. The city sprawled beneath him, lights, life, and endless possibility. For the first time in his life, he felt true freedom. No family, no betrayal, no chains. Just me, and the empire I built with my own hands. And in that moment, Ethan Kane, the long-abandoned son, realized that revenge had been only the first step. His real triumph was the life he had claimed, the legacy he had forged, and the world he would shape in his own image. The Langstons were gone from his story, a cautionary tale of greed and betrayal. Ethan's story, however, was just beginning. The boy they abandoned had become a king. The man they underestimated had become immortal in legend, and the empire of Kane would never fall. The city lights shimmered like stars, and Ethan Kane smiled, knowing this was the final victory, the ultimate triumph of the abandoned son.